Hey, what's up, guys? A little bit since I've done a face cam, so finally got situated at the house. Thanks for being patient, guys. Move has been pretty brutal. As always, internet's always a struggle, so I've been struggling with the internet here. But is what it is, right? Happy to be in a new home, or I got my setup where I need it to be, and I feel like I'm situated enough to be able to trade. And with that being said, I want to obviously start with SPY. We'll kind of make our way down and look at some individual setups as well. And oh my God, it's really echoing here, so hopefully this isn't reflected on the video itself. But yeah, pretty much flat open, right? Nothing really crazy ended up happening, as you guys can see here. Like on the 5 minute over here, you know what we'll do? We'll actually just make it a full panel. You guys can see. Um, kind of looking at this, right? Obviously, I still think this is distribution. I just needed to see some higher time frames and how those were playing out. Some big focal points here were, or was this little 594.5. You can round it up to 595 flat. But this is where I thought was kind of like the buy climax for the distribution format on the daily. And then obviously we had a drop. We had that phantom print that we're targeting down here at 578 to 580, give or take. We created a really nice floor here off of 586. So as I told you guys to mark this on your charts and just kind of keep an eye on that. But we pressed above the 594, 595 level. And I thought this could potentially be our up thrust. I didn't know if it was a daily sequence or a weekly sequence. And then we ended up getting this higher, I would say, distributive bar, kind of showing the intention is truly selling. Pretty much all the moves to the upside have been on low volume. Even the protection of like the lower levels have been on lower volume. It's really interesting to see this. And this is where I thought we would actually see a pretty big sell-off. We didn't see it, right? We ended up kind of gapping above the highs. Really, really tight day on this. And that's pretty much been the story the entire way up. You guys can see, low volume, low spread, where we're not really having much distance created between the high of the day and the low of day. And pretty much any pullback is just testing the previous day open and or close, or even the high of the previous day. So it's not really much extension above with high volume, which is what you'd want to see for a breakout or a true push to the upside. This day here on 6-9 was even tighter, right? And then this pretty much just pulled back to the previous close and or open, rallied a little bit over the high of the previous day, and it's just been doing this over and over and over again. It's been very difficult for, I think, for anybody, right? If you're swing trading, anything that's under 30 days is probably taking some massive hits. If you're day trading intraday, it's probably the only real way to make money. But even then, those moves or pretty much any move is being reversed the following day or within that same daily time frame. And you're starting to see some sell side activity, right? Where it was pretty much any pullback you'd buy calls on if you were doing that. That's where I was dabbling my feet in some SPX calls. And then finally, right, we had a day where dip buying ended up not paying dividends, right? It opened at the highs, slightly wicked up to the upside, which is a little bit different because we were opening previously to, and then wicking down first, so an open low high close. This is now an open high low close, right? So super, super interesting. And even then, right, if you had swung into that bar reversed on you the next day, it kind of closed near the previous day's open, and then we opened down here. We kind of wicked up to the upside. It's been very, very, very slish-loshy, or whatever, I think it's wish-washy, whatever the term may be. It's been very, very volatile, even though we've had tight candle spreads here. So super interested to see where this ends up jumping off of beginning of Monday. Right, I still think that this is an up thrust, but any pullbacks, as I said before, could be met with a nice bounce here. And I still think that we can push up into that 610 mark. And I actually deleted my old video or my old levels on that chart, but I mentioned that we could get something like this, maybe a pullback here. Maybe this pullback goes a little bit deeper, right, where we kind of come to the 20-day, maybe even 586 again, and then we get an up thrust, or I'm sorry, a UTAD, where we'd push up into like 610-ish, 605, and then that's what starts the final distribution phase that'll play out on the daily, in my opinion, and then kind of sell off down, I would say back down to 578, 564 would kind of be the more imminent targets. Could definitely see a pullback all the way to 561, 554, 535, 527. We have some really nice levels to target to the downside and a very clear path of least resistance where I think buyers could really capitulate through those spots. But kind of looking at the beginning of this week, I want to see what ends up happening off two levels, right? So 594.5, which was essentially the low from Friday. If we can kind of hold there, gap down just a little bit, does it manage to hold off of that level, which would coincide with the 20-day right here with my little pink level, and then kind of press up from there? Or do we open a little bit higher, right? And I would obviously use the open as kind of a gauge, right? That's obviously important. But I want to use the weekly open as well as this 599.07 level as kind of my gauge, right? Just a couple daily lows, right? This is why it's hard to trade these like really tight consolidated ranges because there's no clear pivot point in terms of a support or resistance. But you guys can see this has been multiple daily opens, daily closes, daily lows, right? 599 into that 600 level have been really key. So depending where we open, I'll obviously use the weekly open as a gauge, but they're also looking for 599, right? It's kind of like a breakout level. If it can get through 599, maybe kind of pull back and test it really quickly, I think this can move up into 603 to 605. The significance of those guys, I don't know if you guys saw me talking about them. But 605 was something that was being placed on the ask side. I think it was on Thursday. There was a ton of prints at 605.3, and then I wasn't around on Friday, but on Friday we actually saw this kind of pop through on Friday, right? So 27 prints sitting at 603.7. So it doesn't look like a ton, right? Remember, this doesn't give you all the data, but there was a lot of prints to that spot. I think it was roughly 1.2 billion was the exact amount. So just a level to kind of look for as an upside target, right? If we see a breach of some of these levels, I could see this going back up to 603. I think the 604 call or 603 call would kind of be right in the sweet spot in terms of a strike above 599. And I want to jump in really quickly to like the hourly as well. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Hourly on this, I think this is pretty clear on the hourly. Let's kind of remove the studies here really quickly. Very easy, right? Low from here, low from here. This was kind of the close from right over here on I think this was Friday of last week, right? Monday it opened here. Pre-market kind of held here. Obviously some wicks did some damage here, but it didn't close below that. This also kind of pulled down on that phantom print from Tuesday of last week. Remember, then it rallied to the upside, pulled back down, held this as support. We ended up opening, didn't necessarily test it as a back test, but we got pretty dang close, right? This would be that 595 spot, or I'm sorry, yeah, 590, yeah, 599, 99.50, relatively close to that area. Right, I was kind of getting the 594.5 mixed up with this, but yeah, 599 to like 600 was kind of like the sweet spot, and then obviously rallied up. We met some consolidation here at resistance at 603, 604. We sold off of that. We caught 594.5. We rallied back up. Right, a big rejection candle off of this 599, 600. Another rejection, but not as significant, where we didn't have as large of an upside wick and more of the dip was bought. Then we broke out through that, we pulled back, we kind of tested it, had a little bit of a bounce, and then broke under, right? So this is still a key spot. I still think this is a really big line in the sand in terms of resistance. And if it can be maintained as a resistance, we could see a little bit lower. If we break above, I could see that being formed as a support again. So really just kind of looking at 599 and looking at 594.5, right? And then obviously the weekly open is going to play a big role in this as well. So I'm curious to see how that ends up kind of forming out to begin the week. Overall, a really stretched range, so I wouldn't go super heavy on anything just yet. Like I said, it's always okay to take stabs on things, but I would keep portfolio allocation or position allocation under 5% for this. I would not go anything super crazy. SPX, you can take a gamble on that, right? That's always up to you. But I think the play here is short dated upside contracts, right? And then building into the longer dated January contracts, or even taking a hedge as simple as VIX, right? I think a VIX 22, 23 call are still really lucratively priced. I think a lot of people too are underestimating the Bank of Japan decision on Tuesday, Wednesday, and that leads conversely right into FOMC. FOMC is a big thing on Wednesday. It's a short week. We don't have a trading day on Thursday, so we could see a negative VANA kind of distribution here. It's going to be a really interesting week, and obviously from there, what do we go into? The OPEX on the 20th. So we have a really volatile week ahead of us. I do think that we're going to see a lot of those prints show up via dark pool. And I will obviously keep you guys updated on that and kind of look into where money's trying to facilitate price, and then we can look at the chart and can obviously build out positions or a thesis based on that. Yeah, that's really all I got for you guys. Just kind of looking at 599, 594, the weekly open. Do we gap down? Do we gap up? This plays a lot into an NWOG accumulation or an NWOG distribution. If you guys have been with me for quite some time, especially nice whenever you go into these heavy volatile, heavy uh, data catalyst driven weeks, right? These are very, very important. And then, like I said, man, we could get an outlier move if we get some kind of bounce here for a big move up into 610. And then from there, I'm going to be looking to add into those January 2026 puts. I was up like 15 to 20% on Friday at its lowest. Obviously, didn't take anything off of the table. I'm not adequately sized on those, so depending on if this ends up going to 610, I'll obviously be in some drawdown. Not a big deal. There's so much time on those, and we can just let this kind of play out, as long as it needs to until we see that big bear bar, right? Obviously, a footprint candle near the highs, obviously, hopefully within like an active distribution on the daily, or we just get a really ugly weekly look that hints at a reversal. And then I'll start to kind of build out that position a little further. But as of right now, not too stressed about it. They are a little pricey, I will say that, so I apologize, but it gives you an opportunity to not really think about it. And any upside moves, you're not stressed, and you can kind of just build out a position contract by contract. You don't have to add in tranches, right, where you're going 5, 5, 5, and it really eats away at your buying power. You can just slowly build into this with one contract, and hopefully we can get to like 10 to 20. That would be a really nice win at that point if we can pull down into 578, evaluate it. Does it have a weak bounce? Does it give us an LPSY? Or does it just kind of fade through 578 and we can hold down into 564? I kind of did the math roughly. Right, if we kind of pull down into this on the January contracts, those would be like 50-60%. And then if we pull down into 564, those will be roughly 100 to 120%. So those will be really nice. And then I'll take a look really quickly at some individual setups. There's not a lot that I really like, if I'm being entirely honest. I've been pretty much the SPY guy recently, and obviously spot trades on SPX. But I do have a couple names that I want to mention. Obviously, MU is going to be the forefront of that. Really strong name. Hasn't really participated in any downside movements. And then any time that we've seen a potential sell-off candle or reversal candle, it's done the same thing as SPY, right? It'll close at the lows, open up overnight near the highs, and kind of rally with just like a pullback to like the previous close or the open, and kind of continue its strength there. So let's jump into MU and a couple individual charts. Okay, MU is still a very pretty chart, in my opinion. Obviously, you don't want to be taking calls at the highs with any true size behind them. But still, right, if we're looking at this from like a Wyckoff perspective, this is very much a jump the creek scenario where we have a very, very clear resistance. We end up kind of pushing up to this on just pure strength, right? Or we get a gap above and then a pullback, which is a gap and go. We've kind of pushed into this on low volume, which is why I'm playing this a little more safely. Haven't really done anything super crazy with those MU contracts, but very much in play for a jump the creek situation, right? And if you guys don't know jump the creek, I'll just show you really quickly. Jump the creek Wyckoff. Let's just see what we got here. Let's just pull up images. Kind of something like this, right? Good example here where you build out multiple levels of resistance. Typically, you have like your automatic reaction, your test, or your up thrust. You end up kind of building out a clear resistance, and then you kind of get an SOS, which is like your little pullback or consolidation. Other people might call it a flag. If you take a look here, we actually got that on MU right around here, right where we got like kind of like our SOS, kind of our flag, tight consolidation, and then from there you get a breakout on a gap, right? And then it pushes above that, and then it pulls back and bases the top of that resistance, right, or that initial large, I guess, frame resistance, or that flat top. In this case, we have a pretty clear flat top, right around here. You could argue that it's maybe a little bit lower, right? If we want to like say it's here, that's fine too, 113.1, and you could argue that this is now kind of the pullback here at 113, right? So kind of a really pretty chart, and that's why I took my ads off of that one just speculatively. There's still potential here that this fails, right? That this ends up pulling back and gets a little bit of a breather, right? We have a nice little level here. This was a gap that I was targeting at 109, so I used the 110 strike, where we could pull back into that. Potential there that we can even pull back a little deeper into like this progression gap. Technically it's like here, right? It's like down here at like 105, but we could just use this little gap here as kind of like our reference point and remove this one now. Let's draw like a little bar here, a little rectangle, like that, right? So like 106 to 103 roughly. That's where we could get a steeper retracement. Chart would still be absolutely healthy, and then from there we could obviously use our EMAs as our guiding hand. This would probably line up with like a 20-day touch. So that's still really healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. So just kind of keeping my foot a little bit on the gas, but playing it safe still, because obviously calls are now 5x what they used to be. You're obviously at resistance levels here, but you can't ignore kind of like systematic trades, right? I trade this a lot. I've done this with Google. I've done this with Shop. I've done this with Roku. I've done this with so many names, guys. Another good example here, right? Kind of the flat top resistance breakout. You get the pullback here for the SOS, and then it starts to rally even higher. So there's a lot of good examples that you guys can simply use Google for. You know, I would recommend kind of going on your own and finding these, but these are just pretty much staple trades in Wyckoff trading. So definitely keep like a little notebook of you if you see these trades, so that when you identify them, you're not hesitant to jump in, regardless of what people are saying on social media or whatever the case may be. But yeah, that's why I took this, right? And this still looks pretty damn good. For like a pullback off 113, and then we're looking for a continuation up into 123 to 127. If you take a look, right, I mean, obviously I was in this trade. I was like, I think I was the biggest bull on this name on Twitter, right, for the longest time. And if you guys remember, I got shaken out of this name on the April sell-off. I think a lot of people did, right, where I was expecting some kind of sell-off, some kind of pullback to 81.5, which was the lowest I had. It was a small gap from way back when. Obviously, there was a gap even lower down here at 94.96. But I went pretty heavy in shares. I had some leftovers on, I don't even remember what contracts they were at this point, but this broke underneath support, kind of fell to 81.5, and then it just knifed super deep. And typically I wouldn't mind holding that for shares, but with how cheap this name is, right? It's not like a Mag 7 name. It's not super high in valuation. The dollar value is not super high. So, I couldn't hold that. This was at, peak to trough. I guess not peak to trough, from 81.5, which was like kind of the level I was looking for, down to the lows. It was 24%, right? So that I didn't want to hold through that. So once it kind of broke underneath, I closed. But this ended up, if you guys even just take a look and kind of go out to the monthly, and it's unfortunate, some of these names look good on one time frame, they fail, and you kind of get out of the position. But if you go look at a stronger or a longer time frame, they end up kind of looking good on your thesis. Ended up kind of printing a really nice reversal bar here on the monthly, right, where it swept kind of underneath 74.96, closed pretty close to 81.5. But had I noticed this monthly wick, the highest volume we've seen since this kind of consolidation up here. Remember, there was a lot of like clear entities entering at these lows here, right? This is actually when Druckenmiller entered. I think it was either here in September or it was here in March, where he bought a massive position. So there was a lot of people buying the lows, slowly facilitating off of the highs, reaccumulating the lows, right? But on the monthly here, I think this was the shakeout candle where another big buyer entered in and used the opportunity from the tariff sell-off, right, and got in pretty heavy. And since then, right, I mean, we've seen a pretty magnificent markup. It's like almost up 90% or something from those lows. Doesn't mean it's over, right? Like I said, this is now clear monthly breakout. We're in June right now, so we have 15 more days. If this monthly bar closes like this, guys, we are going to see another set of big buyers looking for an opportunity to kind of launch it off of that 113, 115 spot. That monthly bar is hard to ignore, right? So even kind of jumping back to the weekly bar, a lot of strength there, right? Could obviously use a little bit of a pullback, but this is a name I definitely want to keep my focus on. And not take my eyes off of, because I already did that once. Obviously, it was I deserved it, right? I mean, it's kind of getting into something like that, going into an April sell-off like that, it's hard to hold. It's hard to foresee that. But now that we have a clear uptrend, clear break of resistance, I don't think there's a reason to not, or to take my eyes off of it, but kind of accept quality pullbacks and be willing to size in if they do happen. So that's going to be it for MU. Actually, let me do a quick scan because I haven't really looked at many other names. I just got at my desk like an hour and a half ago, and I just wanted to kind of put these two out there. So let me scan through, and then I'll do a little update on anything else I see. If not, I'll just kind of go over the calendar really quickly, and yeah, we'll call it there. All right, guys, hear me out. I know I've been talking about this name forever, and I've lost on it like 3 times. But I'm telling you guys, if we can hit this, this will be a port changer. And that's the reason I haven't given up on just looking at it, waiting for it to set up. This thing looks like it's topping on the daily, right? We've obviously seen extensions above key resistance levels, albeit it's on low volume once again. And every time we get to these highs, we kind of pull back on more meaningful volume. And I still think that this looks like an LPSY relative to this high here, or just even a lower high, right? It doesn't have the same distribution schematic as some of the other names, so this would just be a basic lower high here. But if this is able to kind of put in tweezer tops here and break back underneath this 662.67 major breakout spot, I do think that this has a potential to kind of break back under, retest 662.67, that validate as a lower high, and then this start to trade back down into 630, breach 630, make its way to 592, right? Maybe a bounce off of that. I mean, we'll leave it all up to speculation in the fashion that it does this, but I do think that this can see 550 kind of towards the end of the year, right? The weekly looks terrible. As I said here, you'd want to see this roll over, maybe a lower high off of this, and then maybe a breakdown underneath 662, retest 662, make its way down into this 630 spot, right? There's a gap that actually hasn't been filled here, so maybe that breaches it, retests it, sees a move down to this. I'm sure it takes some earning cycles as well to kind of help facilitate price. But this name definitely looks like it's topping, and I just want everyone to be clear on that I still have this on watch, right? And this name still looks really good, even if we kind of jump out to like the monthly time frame. Monthly just looks like a lower high, right? It's just pushing up. Ever since this accumulative bottom in April, past 2 months have been on very anemic volume, very, very clear divergence here. I don't know. I just think that this name has potential to see a sell-off, man. And if we were able to catch this off of, let's say, just a 662 retest, right, and we're able to get this all the way back down to 550, that's a 17% move for about 113 delta. That would be wild. Absolutely wild, and the contracts are priced very reasonably. I don't really think they're pricing in the correct volatility for a potential downside move, as vol is really supplied right now. So just saying, man, something could definitely trigger a sell-off, whether it be continued geopolitical stuff going on, the tariffs, the BOJ could be a scare that kind of comes out of nowhere that could really spike the contracts, or just a simple earnings catalyst, which they don't have earnings till the end of July. So this name still has a ton of potential to roll over, and I love the weekly look on this one. I saw a couple guys catch this on Friday, so congrats to them. But I think this is just the potential start for this one. We just need a little bit more of a trickle down under 662. Name looks fantastic. One more, too, is NVIDIA, guys. I have not taken my eyes off of NVIDIA. I've caught a couple trades on this one. You guys were a part of those. You had some good gains on them. I think it was on the 6.5 day, and then I haven't touched it since then. Or maybe I touched it here on the spike above 6 on 6.9 that I caught that high. But kind of the same exact thing as SPY, right? Really tight compression. It's not off of a random level, right? This is the deep seek gap, right? Deep seek gap was here where it gapped down massively, ended up kind of pushing down into 116, and then you guys remember it pushed up. I took a short, like I think it was here, but it just kind of ended up going a little bit higher, so I stopped out, and then I retook it here off of the LPSY, because this is a very traditional, very, very traditional distribution, right? Buy climax, up thrust, UTAD, LPSY, break, minor sign of weakness, another LPSY, went for a lower low. This thing was almost perfect, right? I still think it's doing the same thing just on a weekly schematic from like a further out time frame. And there's a reason it's not getting above this spot here, guys. I really think that the distribution isn't over. And you guys can see it's clearly just pinned against this 142.62 level, rounded to 143 if you want. But if you jump out to the weekly, man, like this thing is getting primed for a crazy move, in my opinion. One of the craziest weekly bars we've seen on this one. I mean, this was a pretty crazy one as well, but just from the spread perspective, just weird for NVIDIA, right, off of a key level like that. And the fact that it's not breaking out, you're seeing, I think I mentioned in a previous video, you're seeing a ton of dispersion amongst a lot of these names, right? A lot of these leaders, you can talk about Apple, right? Apple's behaving extremely poorly, and that came off of a distribution as well where we were talking about this forever, right? We kind of got the UTAD breakout, pulled down, LPSY was here, and then it traded down into the 173 target, right? Amazon is kind of misbehaving as well. It's giving the same exact look as NVIDIA. But the reason I like NVIDIA is it's off a very, very key level where a lot of people that were short and missed, or weren't short and missed the short. We're able to get some here, right? It obviously went lower, and now it's right back to that same exact spot. And then if you're a head and shoulders trader, guys, like this doesn't get any better than this, right? If we just take a look at like a head and shoulders like perspective, this is weird, like just how it's setting up. I love the risk off 142.62 if I'm being completely honest, so I kind of want to dabble right away if the market shows a little bit of weakness here, or we open up a little bit under 142.62, or we open above and then pull back under. I think that there's potential in this name for a very similar action for it to kind of break down into this 137 gap, which I don't have marked, but I've known about this for a little bit now. Maybe a lower high off of that, break back under, right? It can test into 134. And I've talked so much about this, guys. We've seen so many of these like path of least resistance trades to the upside, right? Where it's accumulating in a sloping fashion, and we're seeing each new floor get bought up very, very heavily. They bid underneath, and it goes underneath one more time. They're able to collect stop losses and then build out their position utilizing that. And then once they're filled, right, they have an easy way to push it back up because there's so many gaps and so many void areas of liquidity where they're putting their sell orders. Price can magnet to them really quickly. We are now seeing this happen so much on the downside for a lot of these names, and it's already happened on some of these previous distributions, right? And this was a big spot. I mean, obviously, where was it? There was one down here that ended up occurring. It wasn't as clean, right? There wasn't as many kind of gaps for it to trade back down into. One that I always bring up was Tesla. It was Tesla from a couple years ago. We might have to drop this back a little bit. This is when I was like one of the biggest Tesla bulls. You guys, if you know Brocco, you can ask Brocco. Like I was one of the only people talking about this trade. Yeah, it kept like, obviously it had a move down, right? And it had all these gaps to the upside, right? And you guys can see like there was a gap here, it kind of filled these out, and then it started to create tons of gaps, right? We had a gap here, we had a gap here, we had a gap here, we had a big gap here, right? And then I started to notice the accumulative lows, right? Cumulative low here from earnings, right? And then it kind of pushed up into the gap, but not fully, pushed down, stopped everybody out, but then there was an accumulative bottom here with a hammer candle. They made a new low. They bought that new low. Kind of pushed up near the highs. It sold off on, I would say, pretty good volume here, but it didn't make a lower low. Once it got down to the lows, some of the highest volume occurred. Then it swept down, and it kind of gave that 3 lower low look that I always talk about, right? Where you guys can talk about this in the form of a wedge or whatever you guys want to call it. I don't care. But it gave the 3 lower low setup, right? Then it popped, and they had everything they needed to mark it up and start filling out the gaps, right? We already filled this gap here with this move up. We pushed up here. We filled this gap with this move up. We consolidated, and then look how quickly we ripped to fill every single gap due to the path of least resistance, right? And now we're seeing same exact setup, but to the downside, right? Where we're seeing anemic volume to the highs, distribution at the highs with higher volume, kind of stopping price from going higher, and the true intention is occurring. And then we're seeing a pinning of price, right? And we're seeing slight breakouts over the top, which are baiting new bulls in, and then it's closing or opening down below, right? It's just very eerie. And as I said, path of least resistance is now being built to the downside, where this can move very, very quickly into these lower gaps, and it can happen very, very quick, right? Same way that the Tesla trade happened. I think AMD did it back then. MU is kind of doing it as well right now for a more current chart. But this can very easily melt down. I would expect this to kind of bounce off of that one, trade down into 131, pop off 131, retest the progression gap, make its way for a big time move down into 123. And I think this can really honestly push 109 by end of the year. So this is another name that I'm really looking at for a continued distribution down into 109. I don't think it's by chance that this is stopping at the end or the deep seek gap. Just a very eerie spot, right? So Nvidia and Meta are still big shorts that I'm watching. Obviously SPY is the forefront of it. But yeah, Meta, Nvidia, you can even just catch like 5 cons on it, guys, and I think it can absolutely change your account. And you can add into that too, right? As long as it looks good, you're not putting too much risk on the table, right? You can kind of tranche into the position. I think there's a lot of opportunity on that one. And then I haven't talked about like like longer term stuff. Obviously I talked about Tesla. I've had Tesla shares for a while now, but I took TSLL and I closed out of those for a small like 15% win or something like that. I didn't hold it as long as I should have, but it's all good. One that I am interested in, chart isn't like the best right now, but is Lulu, just from like I don't know, just risk to reward here. and how drastically this is sold off, right? You guys can clearly see pressed off of the lows here, kind of formed a bottom off 226, pushed up into the 416 gap. This is actually where I traded it back then, and it just couldn't get over that high at 416, right? It kind of made like a bottom, pressed up to the top, came down to the bottom, pressed up to the top, and then ever since then, right, this thing kind of just capitulated and is now down from those highs at 42%, right? I think this could be a play for some shares if it can kind of catch a triple bottom, if you will, right around 226, maybe even like a little bit shallower, just at this low here at 234. For a long-term hold, right? I think that there's a potential here for this to climb back up to, it might take some time, but I think this could potentially climb back up to what, 478 for a 100% move, maybe a move down into 416 for an 80% move. I think there's some potential here. Just kind of throwing ideas out, right? I'm trying to find the best risk to reward. I mean, you guys even saw, right? A lot of people were super bearish on the market. I was talking nonstop about Google, and everyone said that they hated Google, and it was a no value play. It took a little bit of time, right? I mean, obviously, this kind of pulled down into 141. It kind of pushed back up into 160. It pulled down, made a higher low, then it pressed up again, and then they had a real shakeout bar. I would say this is a terminal shakeout that scared everybody out, but really just ended up being a buy stop in your third consecutive higher low. This name was a slow grinder, but this name ultimately had a big trend up into that 180 target. I was talking about 180 forever, right? I was talking about 180, I was talking about 160, and I was talking about here, like 173, 168. Value plays are all around. You don't have to be buying at the highs like that. So one that I haven't really seen anybody talking about, and I'm very interested in is Lulu. Right around 234, 226. Let's jump to the monthly time frame really quickly. We'll do like 5 years or so. Actually, let's go a little bit longer. I mean, dude, yeah, risk to reward here is pretty insane. Like, obviously, it could sweep underneath 226 and recover, but this is a pretty big trend line here. I mean, this is from, what year is this? It doesn't, I don't know how to, 2024. It's not that long ago, actually. I could see this sweeping, but I just want to keep my eyes on this one for a long-term hold, right? I think this could potentially recover, and it's just an area of interest. These swing high, swing lows are very important. So Lulu's something I'm looking at. And then last, it's not the craziest chart. I'm not the most amazed with it. It really kind of starts from a weekly time frame. Is coin, right? Coin, pretty simple. I'm not the biggest EMA guy, but if we just pull up our EMAs here, this undercut a pretty key, I would say higher low, just a key pivot point here, our swing level at like 240.77, right? This is where it kind of bounced, caught a low, considered a higher low, recovered, kind of got caught in between these old highs here and then this like gap fill level at 300, and it consolidated here for about 4 or 5 weeks, right? And then it broke down, it retested that spot, broke down again, retested this 240 spot, right? So we can kind of know through the retests and the breakdowns of these levels and it having to occur on high volume, it's pretty notable. And then a lower low was made through that. So the fact that this had a big bar like this from earnings and then is now considering, I would consider this kind of like a flag, right? Just a nice little flag here, back on a 240. It's pulled back and held the 231 level, right? So 231 right around here is pretty much the peg, right? I would say the start of the peg candle, which is the power earnings gap. If there's an earnings move up, you're looking for buyers to protect the start of that gap, and then very importantly, control the bottom of that gap if it is to fill. Don't lose progress that you made. But I like how it kind of held 240, tagged into 231 and the 9 EMA, or the 21 and the 9. Sorry, I didn't realize they're both there. Let me change these colors real quick because this is driving me crazy. There we go. And if we take a look at the daily too, this is where it gets pretty interesting. Daily wise, let's remove the studies. You guys can see, I mean, this is considered a floor, right? We can see that a bottom was made here, bottom was made here, bottom was made here, bottom was made here, right? A lot of people are probably buying these lows, and then the moment it breaks underneath these lows, what do you think happens? They probably stop out, right? And the fact that it went lower, right? It had a pretty decent undercut, and the fact that it closed back above is an opportunity where people either got short or went short and are now stuck short over the weekend, where this could gap up. And it's also a situation where people that were long likely got stopped out, and this could reverse on them very quickly with new buyers jumping in off of those stop hunts. or right, just an influx of buyers seeing the undercut occur, right, for those that were patient. Pretty interesting weekly setup, right, with how it undercut that kind of weekly support there. Came off the 921, recovered a key swing point here. So I am kind of watching coin. We'll see where it ends up opening. Maybe for a quick momentum play, right, I would look for a break over 242 for a move this week. So weekly contracts, which are obviously risky. So maybe like 5 to 10 contracts, I would be looking for a move into 250.68. If the move already happens, right? If the move already happens, like let's say it opens up near this gap, right? So we got to consider the gap is kind of like our point of interest here. So let's kind of open this up to 715, right? If it opens up anywhere near 246, it's kind of the same exact thing as MSTR, where we'd expect it to hit this level, pull back for like a divergent 1 hour, divergent daily, divergent 30-minute, whatever it may be, maybe even a divergent 15-minute. Point is, hits it, there's not a heavy amount of selling, and if there are sellers, they can't push it down that far, catches a higher low. I think there's an opportunity to take calls there and look for a breach of 246, should pull back, and then look for a continuation up into 250. So that's important to kind of just watch where we open at, right? So as of right now, let's just take a look, right? We'll just kind of mark this. And like, actually, we'll just keep that blue. We'll keep this green just so I kind of know this is the support level. And this is just something I'm tentatively looking at, right? So we'll see what this looks like in the overnight session. There we go. I mean, I just made this video for no reason. I mean, this hit 246. Let's see if it like rejects that in pre-market. Maybe gives us that flag look. Maybe it pulls back to 242. But those are kind of the setups that I look for. They're repeatable. They happen all the time, and you can back test them. And you can, like I said, you can repeat the same system over and over and over again, right? And you can win more than you lose on them, and most importantly, keep data on them. And if you don't win on them more than you lose on them, then don't trade them, right? It's very simple. But yeah, we'll see how that one looks. But as of right now, guys, main one, SPY, right? And that's number one. Number two is going to be MU. Has to be MU. There's no way I'm taking my eyes off of that chart. 3, the Nvidia, and I guess you can count Meta short in there as well. Those are both kind of in tandem. Both those charts I think have the potential to change your account. I don't say that lightly. I'm not saying to full port. I'm just saying like 5, 10 cons if we can place them right with the right expirations, right? I think that those can absolutely have massive moves into the end of the year. And then last but not least would probably be coin. Coin's just up in the air depending on pre-market. And then the longer dated thing, let's just kind of look at Lulu, right? I think Lulu has some potential there with just how beaten down it is relative to those swing lows. Yeah, that's gonna pretty much be it. Hopefully this is good. I don't know if the face cam or whatever helps. But yeah. Also, I'm gonna get like a panel back here, like a soundproof panel. I'm gonna have some like cool neon light. I'm gonna make this whole thing super sick, and then I'm gonna get like a mic mount, make it super official. But yeah, just a throw together setup for now. I just wanted to jump on and kind of talk to you guys. So I'll edit this video. I'll probably have it up here, I don't know, in the next like hour or so. We'll see. But yeah, appreciate you guys as always. Let's try to keep things tight. It's a very hectic market right now. And best thing you can do is just be patient. I haven't really been trading that much. I've had pretty big wins, and the losses have not been super bad. I still think the worst loss was the Meta 15 cons that I took. And ever since then, it's been pretty controlled. So with that being said, I'm going to call it there. See you guys tomorrow, bright and early. See you guys.